Conspiracy theories are most often a smokescreen to divert us from the true evil.
My dad was right. This family's money is dirty.
Imagination is far more fascinating than reality. Welcome to Working for Uncle Henry, the podcast. I'm your host and the author, Angela Mullins. Throughout this series, there are lots of quips of wisdom in Henry's dialogue, and you'll find many of those on my Pinterest and Instagram. This chapter contains several. Chapter 13. Parker's first official day of work at the Mercantile arrived. He opened his closet to grab something clean to wear. Being broke forced a minimalist wardrobe. Since college, Parker had been able to cram all his clothing into 2 tote bags, white and gray t-shirts, 2 pair of jeans, a pair of cargo pants that zipped off at the knee, gym shorts, running shoes, a filled jacket, socks, and underwear. He stepped back and glanced around the room. Yep, this was his room, but whose clothes were these? A timely knock on the door produced Gerard.
Have you had a chance to try on the new clothes yet?
Did you put these here?
Yes, they're from Trunk Club, so we can return anything you don't like.
Parker raked through the twill pants, shirts, sweaters, even a sport coat and ties. He checked the sizes and smiled.
I think these will be great, Gerard. Thank you.
The butler smiled, bowed, and left the room. Parker put on a pair of dark-washed jeans, checked shirt, tie, and plaid sport coat, and of course his black motorcycle boots. The chilly ride into town on his bike was invigorating. New job, new clothes, new life. Fiona smiled as Parker entered the Mercantile. He nodded with a smile in return and climbed the stairs to begin his day. He had more practice cataloging at the estate than he cared to think about and hoped his duties for the day wouldn't be more of the same. Henry's cataloging system for the business was more sophisticated than he expected. An expensive new laptop with an inventory database software installed awaited Parker on the desk. The process consisted of uploading a photograph of the object and entering any serial or identification numbers, title, author, artist, and even previous owner and dates of transfer. The provenance, as Henry called it. Items Henry had already acquired and sold were there too, a long list, but the buyers' names were obscured for confidentiality. Parker worked at a steady pace, several hours each day, then returned to the estate. A mundane life for some, but he was happy with the new lifestyle. He almost felt at peace. And the books. How could anyone be bored with so many books? He finished Great Expectations. It had hit a little too close to home in some regards. He scoured the shelves for something different when his eyes settled on H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. The book's canvas-like covering indicated age, but good condition. He pulled it gingerly from the shelf, gripping around the center of the book's spine. The subject matter reminded him of recent events. Not that he had forgotten. You don't just forget about finding the dead body of a man who thought time travel was possible. But there had been no mention of it all week. Now seemed a good time to inquire. He grabbed the Wells book and went next door to his uncle's study.
I was wondering, sir, if there'd been any developments in Mr. Qatar's murder.
Henry glanced up from his work. Several disassembled pipes lay scattered over the desk, along with pipe cleaners and olive oil.
No, not so far as I know, but since it's nothing to do with us, I doubt Bobby would feel the need to keep me updated.
Based on what Parker had observed of his uncle, that seemed a surprising statement, but he decided not to push the subject. He turned to leave, then glimpsed the book in his hand.
So, Qatar really thought time travel is possible?
Teleportation, time travel, they're both possible. Man just hasn't figured it out yet. You see, man has this tendency to conclude that if he can't explain or reproduce an occurrence, it must not be possible. Creation is so complex, how light travels, how sound travels, what's happening at the tiniest particles. What is the tiniest particle? Even that changes as something smaller is found. Once man in his vast intelligence thinks he has figured out something, someone else comes along and disproves him. Physics is full of complex ideas that get more complex every time something seems to become clear. Even Einstein was wrong on some things. Theories out the wazoo."
He waved his arms about.
"The people we think are brilliant today will be presumed wrong years later. Yes, teleportation and time travel both occur now, but not at human will or human hands. Nature won't allow us to get that far. God made us curious, so we explore. But we'll never achieve control of the inner workings of creation. One day, man will reach a level of intelligence such that God will have to stop him. Man has been trying to be like God since the beginning in the garden. Then there was the constructing of the tower to heaven in Babel. Now that man has shifted toward the digital, soon he'll be trying to become like God with a chip implant or altering DNA so he can become something other than human."
Henry's narrative on man's ignorance wasn't exactly the answer Parker expected. He stared at his uncle questioningly, but not sure what to ask. Henry picked up one of the pipe stems and began running a pipe cleaner through it.
"You understand basic geometry."
It was a statement to Parker, as if the answer would naturally be yes.
"A line is one-dimensional. Angles and other shapes are two-dimensional. This pipe," he held it out and turned it back and forth, "is three-dimensional. Man is three-dimensional. God, on the other hand, has no dimension. He is outside it all."
Parker stared at his uncle, wondering why he was talking about lines and shapes and dimensions. Henry plunged a pipe cleaner down the stem of another pipe and continued.
"Are you familiar with the term Flatlander?"
No, sir." Henry rolled his chair backward to a bookshelf, grabbed a somewhat tattered paperback, and laid it on the desk.
"Read this when you finish Wells."
Parker picked up the book. Flatland by Edward Abbott.
"Flatland is two-dimensional. Let me show you."
He shoved everything from the right side of his desk to the center, making the mess messier. He held up his index and middle fingers.
"We'll say this desk is Flatland. Everything there is flat. No sides, no top."
He drew a stick man on a small scrap of paper.
"This is Mr. Flatland. He's flat. He can only see what's on the surface, left, right, front, and back."
Henry lowered the tips of his 2 fingers to the desk.
"To a Flatlander, my fingers are just 2 circles. He can't see up, so he can't see my actual fingers. All he sees are the circles the tips of my fingers make on the desk."
He walked his fingers across the desk.
"Now, all he sees are 2 circles moving. He can't see my hand or any of my body the circles are connected to. He doesn't even realize the 2 circles are connected. To him, they appear as 2 separate, two-dimensional objects."
Parker pursed his lips and nodded. At least that much kind of made sense, but where Henry was going with this demonstration didn't.
"Now, if I pick up my fingers," Henry said, demonstrating, "how does that appear to the Flatlander?"
He paused, expecting an answer. Parker took a guess.
"The circles disappeared?"
"Yes," Henry exclaimed. "Because they can't see the rest of me. All they know is the circles were there, and then they weren't. They can't see the whole picture. Suppose you and I, in our 3-dimensional world, can't see the whole picture. God sees more than you and I, right?"
"Yeah, sure. I mean, the whole glass darkly thing?" Parker had no qualms agreeing with that.
"Exactly. So suppose there are spatial dimensions beyond the 3rd, things out there we can't see. But God can because he is outside it. The disappearing circles explain how St. Peter went from being in a prison to knocking on his friend's door."
Parker's eyes narrowed in confusion.
"The angel was in another dimension, of course. He appeared from out of nowhere, just like I picked up my fingers, led Peter past guards without being seen, then disappeared."
Parker cut his eyes at Henry, skeptical of his explanation of how a spirit being moves about. Apparently he only thought he understood Henry's ramblings.
So, who are the Flatlanders? Henry threw up his hands and let out a frustrated groan.
It's a hypothetical analogy to explain how things appear in other dimensions compared to our own. An object we know as a finger connected to much more appears only as a circle in Flatland. Limited vision, limited information. One might say we are like God to a Flatlander.
Parker sank down in the leather chair behind him. His elbows rested on his knees while his hands covered his mouth. Was this some strange Episcopal teaching? His father had never spoken favorably of them. Maybe it was the Christian Science stuff his dad mentioned, or maybe Uncle Henry was simply a true nut job.
You see, Parker, many things we call miracles are not really miracles by definition. That doesn't lessen who God is or his greatness. It actually testifies to how great his design is. That the capabilities of what we call miracles are actually built into the design. He just has to trigger it or set the right particles in motion.
Henry paused, studying Parker's silent concentration. Finally, he walked behind his desk and pulled out the chair.
Just read the book, he said dismissively.
The rec room was an old 3-story building with a small coffee shop on the bottom floor and an arcade and game room on the second floor. The third floor was a mystery to most people in town. Iju Patel spent most of his free time on the second floor, but he was no stranger to the third. On this particular day, on his way out, he spotted Parker seated at the coffee bar. After a busy morning unpacking a new shipment of books Henry acquired from an estate sale up north, Parker made a rare venture away from the mercantile to explore the downtown area and grab a mid-morning snack. Even though Iju's initial meeting with his old college buddy had been premature, he felt he had covered well and no harm done. He probably would have suggested something other than calling the police about the body in the woods had he known what had actually happened, but the snafu appeared to be under control.
I see they didn't arrest you for murder, Iju said.
He ordered a chai latte and plopped down in the seat beside Parker. Parker laughed and took a bite of his muffin.
No more dead bodies?
Iju flashed a toothy smile that glowed against his mocha complexion. Parker shook his head. No, thank goodness.
You ever find out who the dead guy was?
Some physicist or something. He sipped his coffee and added with a laugh, working on a time travel project, if you can believe that.
Seriously? Wow. I guess he should have stayed put, huh? So, you never said what kind of work you're doing.
He picked up the drink the barista set before him, breathed in its spicy aroma, then took a long draw.
You know, for your uncle.
Just sorting through old books and stuff at his store, East Coast Mercantile. You know it? He pointed in the direction of the store as he sipped his coffee. Pretty interesting, though. He has an amazing collection of historical books and documents. Iju nodded.
That's right. I heard he owned that place. Sounds interesting, I guess, if you like that kind of stuff, but what happened to being a history teacher?
Parker shrugged. I don't know. I thought that's what I wanted to do, but it wasn't what I thought it would be. He sighed and broke off a piece of his muffin. He still couldn't bring himself to say he had been fired. Not really sure what I want to do now. I'm feeling kind of lost and disconnected these days. This offer from Uncle Henry came at a perfect time. Hopefully it'll tide me over till something else comes along. And it pays well, he added with a smile.
Huh. I'll bet. Wait, the Archer estate, that's where...
A big grin spread across Iju's face. He wagged his finger at Parker.
That's where Jennifer Benzini hangs out sometimes, dude.
Parker always found himself more embarrassed by the connection to Jennifer than proud. He blushed slightly and nodded. Yeah, she's my cousin. Iju's dark eyes widened to the max.
Jennifer Benzini's your cousin, man?
He punched Parker's arm.
We were friends for 4 years of college, and you never once mentioned that you had a hot, sexy model in your family. What's wrong with you?
Parker shook his head. I hadn't seen her since I was like 14. I didn't think about it. He took a sip. What are you doing here?
Well, I've been here since graduation. I was offered a job back in Bangkok coaching customer service reps on how to sound like Americans, but I opted for a job here instead.
Both laughed. I work for a software developer. They have an office in Newport Sound, but I work at home mostly. Parker grinned. So you're working for the big tech firms that are creating Big Brother for the government? Iju had shared more conspiracy theories than one could imagine during their college years together. Hey, the government don't need any help creating Big Brother. Folks are buying up that stuff all by themselves. Cameras and microphones all over the house, watching and listening to everything. Their whole lives played out on social media platforms. He gulped the cooling chai. Nah, man, my plan is infiltration instead of avoidance or fear. It's what the enlightened ones have been doing wrong, you know. We blow the whistle and then run as far away as possible. I want to be right there in the middle of it with them so I know exactly what they're up to. Hidden away in your swamp bunker? Well, it's not the Archer estate, but I'm comfortable in my little house in the middle of nowhere. So what are you developing? Nothing in particular. My focus is encryption of the software we already have. Sounds right up your alley. Yeah, well, I'm saving my best ideas for my own protection now. Later, we'll see, but man, I'm telling you, the government's up to some wicked stuff. Of course, they've been at it for over a century now. Parker grinned. The Illuminati? Yeah, well... He scanned the room for eavesdroppers and finished with an almost whisper. It's who's controlling the Illuminati that I'm more concerned about. Wait, I thought the Illuminati was at the top of the pyramid. Yeah, they thought so too until aliens stepped in. Among other conspiracies, Iju was an avid believer in UFOs and extraterrestrials. I know you think it's nonsense, but man, I'm telling you, there's evidence, lots of it. Even from astronauts and Air Force pilots. Hey, your uncle was Air Force, wasn't he? Yeah, but I've never heard him talk about UFOs. Well, they don't go around talking about it to everybody. People would think they're nuts. Any personal application of the statement escaped him, but you're only a nut if you're wrong. You ever ask him? No. Well, you should. I don't know if he'd tell you the truth, though. The government silenced a lot of those fellas. They even erased some of them's memory. They spent a ton of money on all that alien technology research. That's why the federal deficit's so big. And then there's Elvis. Parker laughed. Elvis? Yeah, and he didn't die in Vegas. They took him to this secret Air Force base in New Mexico or somewhere. And why did the government take Elvis? Parker asked, still laughing. For the aliens, of course, man. That's where they hold up doing their experiments. He's there for entertainment and study. Parker smiled. Iju waved him off. I'm not crazy, man. I mean, it's not like I believe Hitler has a base on the dark side of the moon or something. Maybe Iceland, but not the moon. Iju checked the Casio on his wrist and swallowed down the rest of his chai. Gotta go, man. Work to do. Catch you later, he said with a punch to Parker's arm. On his way out, he turned to make sure Parker wasn't watching, then slipped quietly upstairs all the way to the 3rd floor. Are you getting the idea? Everyone knows what's going on besides Parker. Poor guy. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to subscribe so you'll know when the next episode drops. And check out the books on Amazon. Purchasing links are in the show notes. Next time, Parker goes to Italy.